Hi everybody, it's David from Doctors of Running, and today we have a head-to-head battle with the HOKA Rocket X2 and the Nike Vaporfly Next %2. I've been getting a lot of questions about how these two shoes compare. There are a lot of similarities, there are some differences. We'll go over some of the similarities first. So similarities, they're both new generation racing shoes. They both use a PEBA-based midsole. They both have a carbon plate. They both are at that IAAF World, or no longer IAAF World Athletics stack height standard, so 40 millimeters of stack in the heel. There is some differences on the heel toe offset. The Nike Vaporfly Next %2 is at an 8 millimeter drop, so a little bit higher of a drop where we're kind of coming down towards that forefoot. So 32 millimeters of stack in the forefoot. The Rocket X2 is a 5 millimeter drop, so we're looking at 35 millimeters of stack in the forefoot. There is a weight difference as well. So weight in my men's 9.5, my Vaporfly Next %1 is 7.1 ounces. My HOKA Rocket X2 is 7.8 ounces. Now the HOKA Rocket X2 is listed at 8.3 ounces. When I tried it on, it felt lighter, it ran lighter. When I weighed it just before the video, it was lighter. So I'm not exactly sure what they're getting the 8.3 ounces from, but mine is 7.8 and my 9.5 for myself. So they are both solid racing shoes, and I think they're going to suit people a little bit differently. Going over some of the differences here, I'm going to start with the fit in the upper. When we take a look at the upper of the Rocket X2, I do think it's a little bit more accommodating. It fits a little bit wider, especially through the midfoot. The heel is like a normal width, and it locks down with the lacing system and holds things in. There is a little suede area here that kind of helps hold things in, creates a little bit of friction there. So not in a bad way, just to hold your heel in. There's a little bit more volume through the forefoot compared to the Vaporfly. And I think it's pretty, like if I hold them up next to each other, you can kind of see. So a little bit more narrow in the Nike, a little bit wider in the HOKA. The heels are actually kind of similar. It's just the Rocket X2 doesn't have that heel counter. So if you're sensitive to heel counters, this could be one worth looking into. It's just reinforced with some internal reinforcement there just from fabric, but that's about it. Tongues are pretty similar. They're both thin racing tongues, but I think because the upper is more accommodating and we have a little bit more volume in the Rocket X2, it feels a little bit more comfortable to lace down tighter for myself. The traction underfoot, I did find it to be better in the Rocket X2. You have a little bit more outsole coverage. I've run in slick conditions. It seemed to be sticky enough. I didn't really have any issues there. Looking at the platform of the Rocket X2 is also a little bit wider than the Nike Vaporfly Next %2. So when I take a look at these shoes and really boil it down, the Nike Vaporfly Next %2 seems to be a little bit more streamlined. It's also a little bit lighter, but it's a little bit more of a narrow platform, definitely more race specific. It's one of those shoes that like I'm not really gonna want to run easy in. Very much a racing shoe. When we look at the Rocket X2, I actually still feel pretty similar. However, it is more comfortable at easy paces than the Vaporfly Next %2. I'll get into why I still like this for running faster versus running slower. I will say though, running slower still feels a little bit better in the Rocket X2 to me compared to the Vaporfly. When we take a look at the ride and the geometries, both similar. We just ran off the specs and everything else, both beveled rides. The toe spring, it looks sharper in the Vaporfly. It's probably pretty similar between the two. It's just the toe spring in the Rocket X2 does feel like it starts a little bit earlier. But it's still decently sharp. Like it still gives you that rolling feeling through the forefoot like you would get in the Vaporfly. It just feels a little bit more of a fluid transition for me, especially from like heel to toe. When I'm turning over. So in the Vaporfly, I kind of felt like my heel was elevated. I'd kind of like come down a little bit clunky over the midfoot, and then the forefoot would be just fine. The Rocket X2 takes some of that away, and it just feels a little bit more balanced underfoot when I'm transitioning, while still giving me some responsiveness and bounce off the forefoot. From a foam standpoint, they are similar. I will say I feel like I still get a little bit more bounce in the Zoom X midsole, but this is still pretty good. It's still solid, it's still bouncy, it still has plenty of protection underfoot. So I think it's going to come down to the runner as to what they prefer. For my own personal mechanics, I would go with the Rocket X2 over the Vaporfly Next Percent 2. I've also been known to pick multiple other shoes over the Vaporfly Next Percent 2. But is it a contender? Is the Rocket X2 a shoe that deserves a space to be talked about in this super shoe world? I think it does. So good job, HOKA. I think it's a solid shoe. Let me know what you like, what you don't like. If there's any other questions you guys have, I might be doing a Rocket X Q&A as well. So we'll go from there, but make sure to hit like, subscribe, all that good stuff for Doctors of Running.